Hello, and welcome to the second February issue of the Node Bootstrapping working group in the ClusterAPI project. We are a CNCF sub-project, and as such, we adhere to the CNCF Code of Conduct. Basically, be nice to each other, treat people as you like to be treated, don't talk over each other. We will not, because we're a small loop, we will not enforce the please raise your hands rule. If you find someone just talking and talking without end, like me right now, and you want to say something, raise your hand. Otherwise, just speak up. All right. Gonna share the agenda. Okay, here we go. So that's our plan for today. All right, we have folks checking in. That's good. Quick check-in. Is anyone new? Does anyone want to say hello, introduce themselves? Go ahead, Pavel.
Hi, I'm new for this specific meeting. I'm in ClusterAPI Bootstrapping, WG, and I want to say hello and at the same time maybe ask a question regarding should I also attend KubeVirt, KubeATM for this or yeah, I mean what are required maybe meetings or six that I should be attending? I mean I also tried to attend KubeATM, but it asked me for corporate company login through I mean these days through my Zoom, so
Wow,
not sure how that works.
that's
Yeah.
unusual. Maybe you should ping those folks and tell them I don't think that's intended. But they might not notice because, that's the environment. I don't think it's mandatory though. We're currently figuring things out for ourselves. This working group is really, really new. Since we're a user of kubeadm, but we don't have like the regular
Mm.
development work there.
Right,
Um,
but since it's like a base and it's in Kubernetes and separate kubeATM, then I think it's worth being involved in this. And I used to join those meetings with Tim and Lubomir, I think, and but now I just ask me for some corporation I can log in, which I don't have, so I'm not sure if yeah.
it seems that meeting is being like run with the wrong access rights, and folks who have access wouldn't notice. So my hint would be just ping them. I'm not trying to say they're not an interesting team. I think the QBAM folks are awesome. So if you just want to have
Yep,
you,
yep, yep.
not gonna talk you out of it.
Thank you. And hello again for this one. That was just yeah, cool.
All right. Anyone else? Good. Okay. Um, Part of our regular check-in is that we go through the to-dos that we aligned on in the previous meeting, and we have two to-dos here. First one's on Matt on reading up the requirements to join the Kubernetes SIG GitHub organization as a repo. Do we have progress on that? Should I take a agenda item for that?
Um, well, I'll tell you what I did. I did some reading. Probably these are documents you've all seen before, but I refreshed my memory. So there's kind of two processes. If you want to just get something in the Kubernetes org, you can go through the whole incubation process. We're not, I think, interested in that since
Yeah,
the other path is obviously have an existing group like SIG Cluster Lifecycle adopt your project and essentially sponsor it, which is where we're at. And there's not a lot of documentation around that, but as far as like, it's basically getting SCL, which for the most part are the same maintainers as CAPI, to agree that, hey, it's ready and we'll make a Kubernetes SIGs org out of it. So it's still essentially convincing them that it's worthwhile. I think we've done that, but I talked with some coworkers about projects. We've done this in the past and gotten into Kubernetes SIGs. And it's always the same pattern, create it somewhere, get it up to speed, show that it's got some support, and then come ask. And so I think that's obviously the standard process we should probably follow. I didn't ping Fabrizio about it yet, but if we have more specific, because I guess we could make the argument that, hey, this is an evolution of code that is already in CAPI. It's already really production level Kubernetes SIGs code, and we're trying to evolve it. So ideally, we could just drop into a Kubernetes SIGs repository from the get-go. I don't think that's likely to go anywhere, but we could certainly make that argument. But it seems like I'm seeing here that we have a temporary home.
Yeah, Johanna
And
actually
so
asked me
that's,
if I can set this up, so I just did.
yeah. Well,
I'll
so anyway, TLDR, that's all I have to say. And that's
good.
probably the way to go is create a temporary home. So
I
that's
think
all.
in my experience with open source projects, it's always better to talk in code than in text and proposals. And if you have code ready to show that implements basically what you're asking for, and has a like level of productivity which we can with the temporary home, it might be a simpler discussion for all parties involved. So that's
Yeah.
thanks for figuring it out. It gives us a clear path forward and a clear like long-term goal. This is great.
Well, I don't know if I figured anything out that you guys didn't already know, but
I did
I
not.
like that. I like the idea of flat car that, because the other question is the optics are kind of bad. If it ends up under, Amborsma slash ignition, and we ask people to provision this, it's unlikely to, but flat car seems like a great place to put it. Yeah. Okay, I'll stop talking.
That's cool. Thanks. All right. I didn't complete my own goal, which is find a better spot. Was kind of cut short in the ClusterAPI meeting to that, and didn't get any traction over Slack so far. So I'll keep the to-do and see if I can find a better slot, or we just communicate asynchronously, which works as well for me. All right. Okay. Yeah, let's get to the beef.
Actually, there was another to do, which is a PR that isn't merged yet. There is some new feedback that I need to follow up on, so that's the last to do. The first to do, actually.
You're right. Yeah, the Cupid
Yeah.
stuff. That's also great stuff. It was bubbled up in the Cluster API meeting, I think not yesterday, but a week ago, about some virtualized test environment that people were using, but it was kind of homegrown. So having this available as a reusable setup, I think is awesome.
Yep. So I'll try to follow up on the feedback soon. Then we can merge.
Great. All right. So yeah, as noted, we have a temporary home for the kubeadm ignition provider. The main rationale for creating that repo is Johanan was basically holding on his changes and he needed just a place to drop them. Ideally, a place that's easy, easily discoverable. And so we just went ahead and got this. We're trying to win the competition of the longest provider name. So we're here for the time being. It has a README in there, not much else. I'll probably iterate over this tomorrow and add the required stuff that you have in CNCF projects, like a license file.
Actually, can you switch? Can you switch branches? Because there is actually stuff in the only other branch there right now.
Very, very nice. Yeah.
Yeah, this is just scaffolding. This is just a cube builder stuff plus some modifications that I made in order to make things just compile. There is no like logic there for now, but yeah, and also no CNCF standard stuff. So feel free to add anything. Yeah, either in a new branch or I don't know how you want to do that. You can commit directly to master at this point, maybe, I don't know, unless you want people to review what you do. Yeah, anyway.
Yeah, no, I'll definitely file a PR. And it's just, you know, it's the regular thing. A maintainers file, a contributing thing. So that's boilerplate which we are familiar with because we just recently joined the CNCF, a much larger project with Flatcar. So I still know the moves, and I just do it here as well. Cool. Nice. Yeah. Oh, by the way, so this is owned by or role description is maintained by a team in one sec. Security. By a team in the Flatcar GitHub organization. Called ClusterAPI Maintainers. That's this team. Those folks are currently on it. They're able to maintain this one repository, and they have admin rights here, so they can change pretty much anything. They also have maintainer access to another repository, and that's that one. And the only thing that means is that, you know, you can push branches and you can manage issues. And the reason for that is in the whole Flatcar org, we're trying to reduce the number of repos that actually have issues as much as we can, and just file all of the issues that concern the project or any sub-project right here. And that's because we kind of merge them into issue boards. We're using GitHub projects a lot, and having this stuff here is really helpful for that. And just to make sure that you folks can act when you need to act, you have maintainer authorization for that repo as well. Lastly, for anyone who wants to join the maintainers team and basically help driving the development of the Bootstrap provider, just let any of the existing maintainers know. This is a very low threshold thing currently because there isn't much of value in the project. So if you want to jump in and actively push this forward, I think, yeah, now's the time to do so. We'll make this very low threshold joining this team later on. When it's a larger team, we'll probably have something like, you know, you need to contribute for a while and then you're good. But right now, I don't see the point for that. So yeah, we're trying to make this as easy as we can for you folks if you want to join in on the fun. That said, we'll probably have a few follow-up items that, you know, makes this sub-project look mature. I think the most important one after, of course, operationalizing the code is having regular tests of the provider that we ship. And yeah, I think there's some additional kind of tasks as fallout of us branching away from the main ClusterAPI project, which we probably want to do. We have a few more options than ClusterAPI because the Flatcar org has set up self-hosted runners. So we're not limited to the GitHub runners. If we want to do more advanced stuff, we can. So we have extra capacity added to the Flatcar org, and we can, you know, allow them for the ClusterAPI Bootstrap provider repo as well. So there are options, but it's also more work to be done. Okay, that's my part. Matt.
Sorry, it was hard to find the raise hand button always. So the self-hosted runners, I'm just curious, do you know if they're a VM that would support nested virtualization
Yes.
and stuff? Awesome.
That's one of the things because what we usually do with the self-hosted runners is just to give you an example of the kind of degrees of freedom that we have here is so that's the Flatcar main distribution repository, and there's a bit of a misnomer for legacy reasons called scripts, but the whole distro is in here. And so with these runners, we are able to, let's look at, yeah, that looks good actually. We're able to build the whole distro and to it didn't. Here. Oh yeah, it failed. We're able to build the whole distro and to run all of the tests that we usually do for releases in a QEMU setup.
Oh, cool.
So there, yeah, this is how it looks like. This is the output.
That looks better, yeah.
And you see there's stuff like kubeadm and networking tests in there as well. So it's a pretty powerful thing, and we can absolutely reuse it for the kubeadm provider.
Great.
Yeah, I'm wondering to what extent we want to reuse existing infrastructure from ClusterAPI, because I'm pretty sure there is quite a lot of existing code for testing ClusterAPI providers. There are probably like contracts that need to be validated, verified. It probably doesn't matter like exactly the type of infrastructure used for the testing, but I mean, I know there are like proud jobs and stuff like that in the Kubernetes ecosystem, and these probably assume that everything is hosted under Kubernetes SIG. So yeah, I'm just bringing this up to see if we can be sort of compliant with CAPI if we use like a completely bespoke testing for this specific provider. What I'm saying is I think we want to avoid using completely bespoke testing, even if we use like a separate organization for doing the testing. That's trivial, but the logic, the code, the jobs, whatever, all of that should be, I think, as similar as possible to other providers, because yeah, anyway, for obvious reasons, I think.
Yeah, that's also important if you want to go back into the SIG eventually, without sharing our own GitHub runners with them. All right. Yeah, that's a good point.
So for not raising hands, so it's more like a question of standardization to have it across SIGs from operational point of view, right?
Correct. And I mean, it's already there. Like there's a huge and very thorough test suite and test environment for ClusterAPI. I see the providers running those tests, like the respective vendors doing these testing, and we should absolutely leverage that. Yes.
Cool. Okay. Noted. Would be nice to help there at some point, of course, when I be able to have everything that's needed for that.
Awesome. Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yes. And since you're speaking up,
I'm thinking about CI/CD. I mean, that's my specialization as always.
Nice. Since you're speaking up, this is a thing that I think can be parallelized in an excellent way. Like, one dev doesn't need to wait for the other dev. So let's see that we can kind of mainline Johannan's changes so people can basically jump on that branch and can help adding their stuff or running tests or understanding how the tests work and all of that. That's cool. Nice.
Yeah, we can probably merge it very soon. I just got like a couple of minutes before the meeting, I got to a state where make tilt up in core copy works with this new provider repo. But there is nothing there. It is just a skeleton that compiles basically with the default kube builder main.go and whatever it does there. So we can merge it because nothing is working and we know nothing is working. So we can add logic and fix any other broken stuff in subsequent PRs.
Cool.
Maybe I can also say that creating this repository is probably the trivial part of the work that we've been doing so far, because I haven't even started trying to import my changes to core copy, right? Because this new repository is supposed to be a flavor of CABPK, right? The kubeadm Bootstrap provider, which means that we are going to need to do some refactoring, some non-disruptive refactoring in core copy.
Yes.
So that the relevant modules are importable and completely reusable for 90% of the CABPK code, so that we can only swap in ignition instead of cloud init, which is like a fairly thin layer in core copy. I haven't figured out how to do that yet. I thought that in order to figure that out, I need a place to play with code, and that's why I created this repository. So the hard part is going to be like figuring out, like trying to import something in the new repo, failing, seeing it fail because it's an internal module, for example, then starting to do the necessary changes. In a feature branch in CoreCAPI, we can do imports from feature branches, I guess, using Go modules while developing, and eventually we're going to merge things, of course, in CoreCAPI and then import the new dependencies into this repository. So yeah, this is going to be the hard part. And yeah, I'd love to get as much help as I can, even at this early stage. I think there are already things to figure out. For example, what changes we need to do in CoreCAPI in order to make the code reusable and importable. So the only thing that I did so far in terms of the code is I started slicing out and isolating and modularizing a little better Cloud Init and Ignition. This is not merged, this is in a feature branch. I'm not done there, but I did get to some sort of sane point where things seem to compile and not break all the tests. Like it broke all the tests, but I fixed them. And yeah, now this is in my opinion, the harder part of doing the actual imports and figuring out how to change the other modules.
Cool.
And by the way, it's not just Bootstrap; it's also control plane, as we already said. Mm-hmm. So there are like two big parts of the CoreCAPI tree. One is Bootstrap, the other is control plane. I only touched Bootstrap so far, so we might have similar changes to do in control plane as well. That's it.
Guillermo?
Yeah. So just to clarify something, Johan, when you say refactoring, so pointing to the first point that you made, refactoring CAPI to make the code reusable and be able to import it, do you mean importing the CAPI packages in this new repo or vice versa?
Importing CoreCAPI packages in the new repo we just created.
Got it. Okay. Sorry, I understood it the other way around. Okay, that makes all sense.
No. So definitely this way. And just to clarify, like to verify it actually makes sense, is the reason we need to do that is we already have a lot of code, like couple thousand lines of code in the CABPK code base. And we're basically creating a new CABPK, which is completely identical to the existing one, except for the fact that it uses Ignition. So we don't want to copy paste all of the CABPK code to do like all the control plane bootstrapping and all of that and all the orchestration, because there is a lot of logic and a lot of bugs that were already fixed. And like there is a lot of experience already in that code base. We don't want to copy it, right? We do want to import it so that ideally, I hope that's possible, but the only difference in this repository from the in-tree CABPK is the fact that we're using Ignition. All the rest should be in CoreCAPI, and we would like this repository to be as thin as possible, basically. I even initially objected to even having a separate repository because I wanted the change to be even thinner than that, because obviously when you create a new repo, then you have a lot of scaffolding and boilerplate and CI and this and that and a lot of like admin overhead, but that's all right. And we decided to go this route. But in terms of the code, we want to have nearly everything imported from CoreCAPI, which means that a lot of things are going to need to be externalized or basically made importable and reusable, which aren't at the moment, because, for example, there is the internal subdirectory in the import path, and things are not like some types are private, they're not exported, stuff like that we need to think about.
Yeah. No, that totally makes sense. It's just it's shifting the abstraction a little bit. CoreCAPI instead of it will still offer the Bootstrap provider, but I feel like the main competency of CAPI is to provide this library that can be used to build other Bootstrap providers versus providing a de facto, which again it will still be, because for his sort of reasons the Kubernetes Bootstrap provider is still going to be there. But I think it goes from there is one Kubernetes Bootstrap provider to there is a library to build as many Kubernetes Bootstrap providers as you want. That makes total sense. So once you get to the control plane, I think that's going to get super interesting. I'm sorry, I'm going on a tangent here. Happy to leave this question for later. But what's your gut feeling about the control plane? I think that's the Bootstrap provider, Kubernetes Bootstrap provider is significantly simpler than the control plane provider. And although you're doing a lot of work on that refactoring and whatnot, and I'm sure that it's painful. The control plane is, I think, is going to be even more challenging. So, short question to what's probably going to be a long answer. Are you thinking about also having a separate control plane provider per flavor, or are you thinking there will be one core, let's call it KCP controller, that somehow, and that somehow to be defined, it's able to interact with different kinds of flavors of the booster provider?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So let me speak ideally first, because we're not at an ideal state, but ideally, the way I envision a proper CAPI design is that for this specific work, we don't need to touch KCP at all, because things like orchestrating a control plane, figuring out how many machines I have, then sending the command to create a new machine are a completely separate concern from bootstrapping a machine and figuring out how to inject Ignition or Cloud Init or whatever to the infrastructure provider and then bringing up the operating system. That's one reason why I strongly advocated initially to have a new provisioner contract that basically completely separates the notion of Bootstrap from provisioning. And I haven't looked in depth into KCP. I'm not too familiar with that part of the code base, but logically, I would say that if we had a clean design like what I described from the start, I don't see why we would need to touch KCP, right? Because if the only thing KCP does is orchestrating, bringing up, and then maintaining and maybe tearing down the control plane, then the lowest unit of abstraction that it's going to work with is a machine. It shouldn't care what happens within the machine. It shouldn't care about bringing up it shouldn't know about the OS itself at all, as far as I can tell, right? Because that's for the Bootstrap provider and the infrastructure provider to worry about. But I realize that this might not be the case because we have some mixture of concerns in some of the API types, right? So, for example, I don't remember exactly the names, forgive me about that, but if we have a kubeadm control plane type that has a field which includes cloud init stuff, which I think is the case, then this mix of concerns forces us to touch KCP whenever we want to do something around cloud init or ignition, because the bootstrap /provisioning and the orchestration of the control plane are not orthogonal. They're somewhat tightly coupled, which is the case where we're at. So that's a long way to say I don't know what we're gonna have to do in KCP. I want to do the least damage possible there, of course. But yeah, I guess we'll see. I really hope that we don't get to a point where we realize that the whole path that we started walking in is completely invalid because we actually are forced to do a more significant breaking change throughout the code base in order to support multiple provisions. I really hope we don't get to that point. If we do, then the good news is that I already have a design proposal that offers a more thorough separation. But the bad news is that I think there is a majority of maintainers that object to this direction for understandable reasons at this point. So yeah, I don't know, and I guess we'll have to see. If you have more concrete thoughts about that, or if you know or already have some hunches regarding how to do things in KCP, I'd love to hear, and feel free to join, of course, the coding part.
I have a couple of thoughts. One is, I think your original intent in an ideal world is probably the right way to solve this problem. If we were starting CAPI from the beginning, I will probably advocate for an idea similar to what you propose. I do probably agree with the maintainers that doing that, it's probably going to end up in this project never going to be finished. Not because you're not doing an amazing job, which you are, or because you're not capable of doing it, because I know that the friction that a project of this size is going to create an initiative like that is just too high for anyone to, unless you somehow had like the willpower of, I don't know, of some kind of like hero, and you're willing to like work on this for years and years. I don't think that I think there is a way to provide value in a shorter period of time. And I think what you're doing here with the flavors of the Bootstrap provider is probably the right way. How to integrate this on KCP? I think there are probably three main ideas. The first idea is completely separate CRDs. Well, maybe four. The first one is the most obvious one, although my least favorite one, which is similar to what you're doing with the Bootstrap provider, which is having a separate control plane controller per flavor of Bootstrap provider, right? So you have one for Cloud Init, one for Ignition, one for whatever. And then you have these core libraries that you can import from your flavor controller, and then just plug in whichever is your logic for the actual handling of the Bootstrap object. I don't like that one a lot, but it's one option. The other options go through reusing the same KCP controller with multiple flavors. So how you solve that, you could either use a reference to an object instead of embedding the object in the same way that we reference the Bootstrap object from the machines. You could have a Bootstrap template or whatever you want to call it that you reference from the KCP. Now that has its own set of issues because now you have to deal with two objects instead of one, so changes might not be atomic. But one way of doing it. The other way is still embedding the Bootstrap provider specific fields into the KCP, but doing it in some kind of free-form way, so it wouldn't be statically type checked by the CRD definition. It will be some kind of like free-form field that, depending on the provider, you can use. You can do it one way or the other. Now, we can obviously do the validation at the webhook level using Go code, but it wouldn't be done by the API server directly. And the last one, which I think will be the fourth one, is to somehow have different CRDs per flavor, but having one single controller that can reconciliate all of them. Those are my thoughts so far. Like I've been thinking about this problem for a bit, and like probably the last two are my favorite two options.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I understood most of what you said. I didn't get all the details, I guess, but that's okay. Like at this point, I don't think we have to settle on one approach right now, and it's fine to experiment and change and figure out what works and doesn't work. So yeah, I think your input and you're obviously very experienced with CAPI and with Kubernetes controllers. I think it could be really valuable, and if at any point you want to join even the coding and not just the ideation, then please feel very welcome. To me, the main thing that I care about is the design that we end up with in terms of the API objects. Now, if here too we have like a no-go for doing anything that is breaking change, that's okay. I'll accept that. But the thing is that it's very hard for me as an engineer to touch an area of the code, see a way to solve once and for all the problems we're encountering now, and then just not going that direction and basically finding it feels like a workaround, for example, to do some of the ideas that you suggested. Because the thing is, and I understand that we cannot just break everything and like go on a 5-year project that will never get merged. I completely agree there, but I wonder if there are still opportunities to say maybe KCP is doing too much right now, because it's to me it's very clearly, at least in my opinion, it's very clearly a flaw that a controller whose main job is to orchestrate the control plane needs to know about details at the machine level. Because the way CAPI, the core CAPI API is designed right now is we have two places where things like Cloud Init or Ignition or whatever, like Bootstrap stuff, are mentioned. One is worker machines, which is like under MD, what was it called, the machine group, I don't remember now. And the other is the control plane. Now, what would make sense to me, which isn't the case right now, is to have an object that symbolizes a control plane, And then that information is only to figure things out at a very high level, like how many replicas of the control plane do we have? Are they up or not? The Kubernetes version, stuff like that. And then underneath that, some data gets delegated to the same entity that creates worker machines, right? Because as far as the KCP controller is concerned, I don't see why there should be a difference between a working machine and a controller machine. They should be exactly the same. The only difference is that there are some differences in the provisioning data that gets injected eventually to the infrastructure provider. But other than that, it's a machine, and it's either up or down, and either we have the right number of replicas or we don't, right? But that's not the case, and we took things that are from the infrastructure layer, let's call it, and we brought them up to the control plane controller, and now we have this entanglement. So I'm wondering if we get to like these tight corners where we have to figure out, for example, which option of the 4 options you described to go with. I'm wondering if there will be some opportunities for, since we're already taking the time to do some sort of refactoring that would remove some responsibilities from KCP to make it simpler and only worry about things that it's supposed to worry about. Again, supposed in my opinion, of course, but yeah. Maybe that's too ambitious, and maybe we should rule that out from the start. I don't know. Again, I haven't looked at the KCP code base too much because I never contributed to it so far. But yeah, just my thought. I want to, if there is only a slight extra effort compared to going with the, I don't know, 2 CRDs, whatever, all the things that we said. If it's only like 10-20% more work to do a proper refactoring, I'd rather do the proper refactoring, and then the next time there is a new provisioning format, whoever is going to implement that doesn't have to go through the whole thing that we just went through, right? Because we did the separation. But I don't know, maybe that's too optimistic.
No. I don't think it is. I think you make good points. And sorry, I'll finish here and let others speak. I think you make good points. I think the only no here is breaking the API.
Yeah.
I think in terms of like changing code, refactoring, moving things around, it's a matter of resources. And I think it's a matter of like friction from the community. So it just depends on how much time this team, in particular, it seems that you're leading this, can put. But I wouldn't discard anything unless it involves breaking the API. Anything else, I think, should be on the table, and this is a trade-off analysis at some point.
Right. And just to clarify, by breaking the API, do you mean that we cannot make changes in a new CRD version that can be migrated to with proper conversions and all of that? Like that's also breaking the API? Because of course, we're not talking about changing things that are already working on customers' clusters. That's of course not on the table.
No, I don't think there's a breaking change. I think that is a high effort change, but it's not a breaking change, right? If you create a new version and there is a bi-directional conversion, like following API conventions in Kubernetes, I don't consider that a breaking change. A breaking change will be, hey, we are creating this new version of the API and the KCP object doesn't have the Bootstrap information or like the OS provisioning fields anymore. Those now live in a different object that is linked or whatnot, but there is no way to move back to the previous version because, those fields are missing and they don't match anymore. That's kind of like a breaking change in my opinion. And that's why I thought that introducing that concept of OS provisioning or machine provisioning, I forgot how you mentioned it. It was extremely difficult to make it in a not breaking change. I'm not saying there's not a way to do that, but the moment that you introduce a new abstraction, a new type of provider, however you want to call it, in CAPI, it becomes quite difficult to migrate, especially if you're taking a provider that right now has both of the responsibilities and they're just splitting into 2.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I see what you mean. So you're saying what I described does not constitute a breaking change, but it is highly unlikely that we can do such a significant refactoring without being forced to do a breaking change, something like that. Okay, because we are talking about moving things between CRDs. That's the big refactoring that I'm talking about, right? Because as long as you have something like disk setup under KCP, then you have a mix of concerns, right? This is a cloud in its specific field that, in my opinion, belongs way lower in the layers. That's the point. So yeah, I guess that would be a breaking change then, because we're going to be removing fields. And yeah, I'm not too experienced with CRD type conversions, but yeah.
As I read this, I understand that there always needs to be a migration path for users that want to upgrade, right? So you retain API compatibility, and there's a lot of options, like backwards compatibility options that you can pull here. You could mimic those fields. You can explain that, yeah, those fields are part of the respective objects, but don't necessarily mean that, in the lower levels they will arrive at such, and all of that. If you have additional abstraction layers between those 2 points, what I wanted to bring up is kind of similar to what you're thinking about, like having a stronger abstraction there, but for different reasons. And yes, there might very well be a third provisioning configuration format in the future that may kind of mandate those reasons. But I see this interconnection that you mentioned in your analysis between the node provisioning logic and the Kubernetes concerns on top of that. And the best example for that is exactly the differentiation between a control plane node and a worker node, which from the OS perspective are exactly the same. If you ignore like all things Kubernetes on top, right? And this goes through the whole project. It starts with the image builder approach and just mingling everything together and then shipping these images, which has a number of advantages, but also particularly from the operating system point of view, a number of huge disadvantages. And we're trying to work against that with the SysX approach now. It might become more interesting for core ClusterAPI to kind of rethink this interconnection of concerns which should be separated, and I'm thinking mostly about the in-place updates proposal here, because you will run into all kinds of funny issues with your operating system if you try to pull that off with the current kind of intermingling of concerns that we see. So if you don't have a clear way to kind of communicate to the lower levels and abstract the communication to the lower levels, that you need your operating system to perform certain tasks without writing apt-get something into your Go code for ClusterAPI, then you need these separations. So maybe we arrive at that understanding, maybe not, but I see these kind of sub-projects like in-place updates as a big potential driver in the future for our kind of operating system abstraction work as well. It's lateral to what we're currently doing, so it's not hitting right into the same lane, but it's definitely related. All right. I think we have a good plan for the next steps. That's great. So we're gonna I think iterate in the Bootstrap provider first and see like how we can be a good Bootstrap provider and reuse upstream cluster or core cluster API features kind of as a proof of concept. I see the diving into and bringing up CI as kind of a separate lane to that. So I will take a to-do for the next meeting to update the proposals and tracks, because this needs updating. Like some of the topics have resolved and others are new. So I'm gonna take that one. Cool. Any other like immediate items, immediate action items that you folks are seeing until the next time? All right, good. Then anything else you folks want to bubble up before we close?
Yeah, I have a question. So regarding those in-place updates that were mentioned here and different nodes, I remember for control planes, this encapsulated thingy, everything running in container Linux, and that was called Hypercube. Everything was packed into one package until it was deprecated in CoreOS back then. And I remember being forced to just focus on separate binaries, starting kube control manager, going through everything else. And question is that kind of approach, does that kind of approach of thinking in regards of this in-place updates makes sense, having container Linux cloud native approach in mind? Does it make sense?
We have something better, but it checks the same boxes that you're looking for. It comes with the same features, but it comes with a lot more features, and that thing is called system extensions. So if you want to have a look at system extensions, it solves your problems because it ships the whole set of binaries that you need to operate, and it also allows nice things like atomic updates and rollbacks and all of that. And yeah, I mean, there's stuff out there on systemd sysx you might want to look into. If you join the Flatcar Metrics channel and ask us about sysx and Kubernetes, doesn't need to be ClusterAPI because it works with plain Kubernetes as well. Then yeah, that's a good resource as well.
Okay, and thank you for that. And I have another question regarding CAPI. Let's say there is a cloud scaler that basically manages the scaling flow of nodes coming in or out based on wherever HPAs. And suppose, I mean, you can have a cluster where everything is in one network, but you can have like overlay networking. You can have different kind of networking. You can have I don't know, cloud CNI with control planes to which you don't have access to, and you can have nodes like worker nodes and everything. And then I think that was kind of discussed, and CAPI provides those generic, that should be generic bootstrap templating. But from what I understand, we want to separate control planes bootstrapping and auto-scaling from node workers, let's call them like this, or I don't know, minions, what they were called back in the day. To separate concern.
Yeah,
I see. Okay, so that clarifies everything. Thank you.
It's basically to put it plain and simple. Anything cloud native should happen on the Kubernetes layer, and the operating system should be agnostic to it. And should offer the primitives necessary to do it, but it shouldn't really know semantically that this is happening right now. And currently it does technically know it's a control plane node, and it shouldn't need to have this knowledge.
Yep. Okay. I see. Oh, I see what you're saying. Thank you.
Welcome. All right, folks. Then thanks for attending. See you in 2 weeks.
Thanks, Tilo. See ya.